Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In the last few videos on Content Hub, we have checked how we can create an entity in Content Hub using WebClient SDK. Also, how we can delete an entity using the same, right? So today we are going to check on how we can update an existing entity in Content Hub using WebClient SDK. So let's just get started. So this is my solution, and here let's just copy this one and name this as update entity. Okay, and then let's just copy over everything from here. Date, because we're going to do it for asset, so let's just call it as asset. Okay, and then we can just remove everything from here. So the thing which we are going to do here is that we're going to update an existing entity, and to check that, maybe let's just go to assets, and here let's just go to some maybe let's just go to this one, this asset. And here what we will do, we will just try to change the asset description and the type, asset type also for this one, right? So that we know we understand how we can do it for the property as well as for the relation. So yeah, coming back to our solution, update. So before we update any entity, the first thing which we need is we need to fetch that specific entity from our content hub, right? So yeah, let's just target one entity, and which is this specific asset in our case, which is an ID called with the number 31342. So first let's declare uh, asset ID, and we can just define same asset. Okay, so we have this asset, and then let's just get this asset first. So in order to get this asset, what we can do, uh, we have this IE entity, and here maybe asset equals to we have that yeah, M connector. It was M connector dot client, yes, dot entities, because we're trying to fetch the entities, and not, we have this get async, right? And what this get async expects is it expects and asset ID, and an optional parameter also, which is a load configuration. And this load configuration also has different parameters on it, like culture configuration. Then some there are three configuration which comes as part of this identity load configuration. We can check also that later, but for now let's just pass the asset ID, and we'll just get this asset back as the entity back. So pass this asset entity here, which is okay, and let's just resolve the references. Okay, and yes, so we have this. So wait, okay, so now uh, okay, okay, so this looks good, right? So now we, as part of this asset and asset entity, we should have this particular asset, this specific entity with us, this one. So once we have this asset entity, so the first thing which we are trying to do here is we are just trying to update the asset description, right? This particular field. So in order to do that, we have this asset entity now, and for this asset entity we can simply call set property value. And here um, if we check what it expects, so it expects a name and a value which we want to update there, right? So let's just call this as asset description as a name, and then the value we can just say as asset description from SDK, right? Fine, so let's just do this much. Yeah, so once we set the value, we also need to save it. So in order to save it, so let's just call this M connector, and then we have client, then we have entities, we have save async here, and here we can simply pass our asset entity. And yes, we wait, and then should be fine for now, right? So far what we have done, we have just we have created this update asset entity method, and what it expects, what we're doing here is we have just passed one asset entity ID, which is this specific asset, and then once we have this asset, we are just setting up this asset description, and the value is asset description from SDK, and simply we are saving it. So let's just call this update entity from our main program, and as usual what we can do is we can simply copy over, and we'll just call it as update entity of asset type, which is okay. And here what I'm going to do is, so it is update entity dot update asset entity, right? So we are just calling this update asset entity, and this will call this one. Okay, so let's just run it. So let's see what's the outcome now. Okay, so so we have an error here, like property with the name asset description does not exist or is not loaded. Okay, so in this case, if we go back to our system and see, we have this asset description here. This looks good. So just to rule out that the name which we're using is correct, what we have to do is, let's just go to manage section. Let's just go to manage, and from here let's go to schema, right? And from here we can go to m.asset, because that's what we are trying to update here. So here we have overview, we have this asset description. Okay, so if you see here, like we have this asset description, and if I just click on edit, the name is set as asset description, but the one which I was using before, that is just set as a label there, right? So uh, we can simply use asset description here, and let's just go back to our code and just remove this description from here and try again. So just make a note that the property name which you are setting there is the same property name which is set on the system, and you're not using just the label value there. So yeah, this looks good. And if we just quickly go back to our instance and just refresh it, right? So now what we are seeing here is we have our asset description, which is coming as asset description from SDK. So that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to update our asset description using from code using WebClient SDK. So one step is working fine. So the next thing is, let's just try to work with the relations, how we can update our relation. Right? So in this case, we have this type. So this is nothing but an asset type, and to update the relation for a specific entity, there is a different process which we have to follow, because it works based on identifiers and IDs. So before that, let me also open that reference for you. And if I go to external integration, WebClient SDK, and then we have development, and here we have entity. Yeah, so we have this relation, right? So relations are used to link entities together. So let's say I have this specific asset detail page, so this is also an entity, because everything in Content Hub is an entity. Our relation, our taxonomies, our option list, everything is an entity, right? But just the definition is different, but everything is an entity. And here relations basically used to link entities together. This page discusses on how to get relation, their values, and all those things. So we don't have to basically get into all those things for now, but relations are a way to link two different entities together. And there are They could be, we can have relations in different format, right? So we have, I child, one to many, many to many, these kind of relations we can have. So in order to update a relation, so in this case, the reason I was showing you this relation here, because here the relation what we have here, like this type asset type, right? So this is also a relation, and the type of that relation is actually dependent on the cardinality which we have set there. So if I go back to my m.asset again, and if I close this one, and if we go back to asset type to asset, because that's what we have used, just to be sure, I can just tell you here, the name is asset type to asset, right? And we are just using the name as type, right? So we are just using the name as type here. So here, if I just clicked on that edit member, and here you can see the cardinality which we have defined here is 1 to many, right? So this is important, and because based on this only, we can, we are actually going to fetch this specific as this specific relation for that, for the context, for the current entity which you're working on. So here the cardinality is defined as 1 to many, which means many asset entities can be linked to one m.asset type entity, right? So normally m.asset entity you can think of is a, is a last level of, is the last in the hierarchy, which means it is a, it is not parent of somebody. It is, this m.asset has, many parents on, on top of it, like because many things are dependent on, before even we create a specific asset, because in order to create a specific asset we need several other things also, right? Like m.file is one of the example. Like we basically create a rendition, right? So we, for that we need a file. So that is also one thing which we need even before creating an asset. We also have these option lists, we have this taxonomy. So all the things we need even before creating an asset. So that's why m.asset you can think of is is in the, is in the last in the hierarchy. So what this cardinality 1 to many means, that many asset entities can be linked to one asset type, which means, many is like this, this specific asset type, which is, asset type can be linked to many asset entities. But for one asset, there cannot be more than one asset type, right? So that's what the 1 to many cardinality defines for this specific member there. So which means now we first have to get, we first have to, because our use cases, we are just trying to update this asset type from social media to something else, right? So if I click on this specific item, if I try to edit it, and if I click on plus icon, so you see, like, I have different types of asset types added to the system. Social media is one of the thing which is already selected. Then we have fact sheet, test asset type, archive, training asset type. So think of an example where I'm just trying to change it from social media to test asset type. And as this was a taxonomy, so first we need to we need to get an we need to get that specific type which we want to update to this asset, right? So I'm not changing anything in here, but one thing which I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my taxonomy real quick. And so under manage, let's just go to taxonomy, and here on the taxonomy you can search for m.asset type, right? Okay, so if I go to the m.asset type, so these are the things which we we have already configured. The one which is already selected for this asset is social media. So I just want to change it from social media to something else. Let's take an example of test asset type. So I just want to set this specific value there. So in order to configure this one, I just need to get this value first, because this is what I'm just going to set as part of my entity which I'm working with, right? So in order to get this specific asset, it is straightforward, like how basically we get any other entity. Like this is the same process which we have to follow here. Let me just click on this information icon, and here you can see we have an identifier, right? So we can basically get an entity entity based on identifier or based on ID. So this is an ID. You can see on the the menu bar here. In the browser, you can see we have 31242 as an entity ID, and we also have an identifier, so we can load our taxonomy, we can load our entity either using ID or using identify here, right? So let's just do that thing first. So in order to do that, okay, so let me just add update relation. Okay, and I'll just call it as asset type. Okay, so now in so as I mentioned, we first need to get that specific asset type which I want to update there, right? So let's just call it as identity, and then my asset type entity, right? So, and here I can simply call this one, or maybe let me simply copy over from here and put it here. And instead of this, let me just pass the identifier. And once I have the identifier, let me just put it here. So I'm just trying to load m.assetType.test asset type. So I should have my asset type entity here now, which I'm just trying to update to my current and entity, which is my asset entity. So that is step one, and the next step, we we also need to get the relation, which means like which field we are trying to update there, right? We are trying to update a relational field there, and in order to fetch that relation field, as I mentioned, if I go back to here, like we have relations, we have, there are different relation types which we can use. So the one which we are going to use for this specific asset type to asset is, we have it I child to one parent relation, I child to one parent relation, right? Because in this specific case, one asset can have max to max for only one asset type configured. That's the cardinality which is defined for that particular member. So in order to get that field, let's just call it as let me simply copy it from here, and let me just put it right, and maybe asset entity relation, right? And here in order to get the relation for the specific entity, we can simply call as entity asset entity here, right? Then we have get relation. Yes, we have get relation async, and what type of it we are trying to load. Get the relation of type I child to one parameter relation, and here what is the field, what is the relation field we have, right? So in this specific case, if I check, we are trying to update this type, but this type is not, is not an actual field, and the actual field type is okay, and the actual field type is, let's just go back here to our schema, and dot asset. Let's just go here, and we have overview, we have asset type to asset. So this is what we are trying to fetch, and here just put that value, and okay, it is async, so let's just call it as await. And then, so yeah, so in this step what we have done is we have just we have fetched that entity which we want to update as part of our asset entity, which is of type test asset type. The next thing, we in the next statement, we have tried fetching the relation field which you want to update, which is asset type to asset in our case, right? So once we have this, but once we have what value we want to update and which from to which field we want to update, to this entity relation, right? So this entity relation we can simply call as parent, and here, so see, this is the parent which you're trying to update, but what is the value of it, right? So that value we want, because that value we have already we have already retrieved that what value we want to update, which is of type m.asset type test asset type. So let's just copy this one, and let's just copy the value out of it. That's it, right? So once we have this one, it gets updated here, and yeah, then we have to basically save it, which is already in place. So this should do the job. Let's just try it. Before even that, let's just go to our page and see what value we have here. So it is social media, and we have just tried changing this social media to test asset type, right? So let's just quickly check that. Okay, this seems to be okay. Let's just go back to our system here, and yes, so now we have this test asset type, right? So this is how we can update our properties and our relations, using the set property value to update the property, and then we need further relations. We just need to get what field we want to update, what value we want to update there, to which field we want to update, and then just use the cardinality which is defined for that specific member as part of your m.asset entity, or for that sake any other entity. And because that cardinality is important, and once you have that in place, then just update the values accordingly, and finally you just save it so that it gets persisted into the content hub system. So guys, that's what I just wanted to cover as part of today's video. I hope you'll find it helpful. If you guys have any questions around it, feel free to reach out, and yeah, we can check it. And yeah, thanks guys for watching. See you in my next one. Thank you.